in a twist, this movie, one might actually say that it is very modern, or it was modern for the time that it was written. Yeah, because of her character. Yeah, and that's probably why I like it.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast, where we discuss the world of film from a fresh angle. And now your host, Robert Yanis Jr.
Welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast. This is Rob. On this show, we democratize the film criticism conversation by bringing on fans and critics alike to dig into their personal connection to a current or classic release. This week, we're talking the 1945 film Christmas in Connecticut, and I am pleased to welcome to the show Laurie London. Laurie, welcome to the Crooked Table Podcast.
Oh, thank you, Robert. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So can you tell listeners a little bit, I know what you have going on. I know that you're a children's author and all that, but tell people a little bit about Trippi the Fly, that book series, and your plans for the character.
Oh, great. I would love to. Thank you so much. I'm a singer-songwriter. I'm an author as well, and my musical experience kind of lends itself to a lot of the things I do with the character of Tripi the Fly, who is a fly who cannot fly, sadly, but he's very plucky. He does not allow it to get him down. He can talk, read, write, dance, sing. He's very talented, but, he just can't do this one thing he should be able to do. I find this character, he's quite limitless, and I do also do the voiceover. I perform voiceover of the character Tripi the Fly on the audiobooks. Trippi was gifted to me. I work for one of the major airlines, and one day I was working, and this little fly was kind of hanging out with me, Robert, and I'm talking to it because people who know me, I'm quite silly, and I enjoy being silly, and he kept going in and out of the airplane, and just very quickly the flight attendant looks at me and she says, "I don't kill things." And I said, "I don't either." And I remember we high-fived each other, we were enjoying the fact that we were nonviolent, And right at the end, he flies in the plane, the door is half shut, and she just kind of looks at me and shrugs her shoulders, and I'm like, okay. So that's where he was born. And for about a week later, I was like, why didn't he just fly there? Why did he have to get on a plane? I don't get it, And then later the thing came in, it just came in my head like a thought, and it was well, he can't fly. Well, why not? I don't know. Those are adult issues. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my goodness, could this be a children's book? And now it has turned into a series. I'm very excited, and you know this, but I'll tell the listening audience. My lawyer and we had submitted to Nickelodeon about a year ago. And there was some interest, but these people, of course, they want a cartoon short, and understandably so. But there was interest, and so I'm hanging on to that. There was interest.
That's something.
Yes. So lo and behold, a year later, I have met all these wonderful people, creatives that have stepped up and are helping me make this cartoon short, and it's pretty incredible. I just finished writing the cartoon short. We've actually started filming, so I'm hoping by fall we'll be able to have that short for Nickelodeon. So, yeah.
Awesome. So what are the plans for the short? Is it just festivals, that kind of thing? Like, what are you going to submit it to exactly? Is it just to Nickelodeon directly?
This is pretty well. We have some other heavy hitters that I've been introduced to as well. I guess it's okay to mention this. Nickelodeon. We have a connection to DreamWorks as well. Okay. Two other people which are very well known in the business are Fred Siebert and a gentleman by the name of Albie Hecht. And so these people are also going to have the film submitted to them as well. Yeah, so It's really great.
That's amazing. So, because just because I'm really interested in the entertainment industry, that's why I have this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Is the short intended to be sort of a proof of concept for something down bigger, like a feature?
Oh goodness, yes, absolutely,
okay.
Yes. As I've got some serious things floating around in my head, Robert. Definitely, I just laugh when I start thinking about what goes around in my head. But anyway, yes, absolutely. I see this character, as I said, he's very limitless. Basically, here he is. He's a character who has wings. If we had wings, I don't know. I think I might go into a depression if I couldn't fly. And I had wings. I mean, really, what is this about?
Not only do you have wings, you're the type of creature that you are is literally called to fly.
Absolutely. I mean, ability to kind of look at the bright side of things.
Yeah.
It's not to say he doesn't get sad now and again, but he shakes it off. He's very plucky, and he looks at other things. He's kind of like a sponge. He wants to learn things, and if he saw something that looked different, he'd probably want to go up to it and know, well, why are, let me touch you, feel you, let me get to know you, whatever you are.
Right.
He's an inquisitive, curious. He's just a lovely character. He really is, and he's adventurous. He's got a wild imagination for sure. And yes, the beginning of this cartoon short. Actually, no one will know it except for the people that are involved in this, but and without actually saying anything, it's hard to do that. The beginning of this short basically alludes to the end of the series when he eventually does fly. I will say that. He
Spoilers.
does eventually fly after he travels the globe, though. He has to travel the globe first and visit all these cool places in far off lands, and meet all these different cultures. And I mean, in the second book, the first book is Trippi Takes Flight, where he is returning a library book because, he can read, right? And he meets the Great Book. And the Great Book tells him about all the cool places he can go, how to get there, even if he can't fly. He becomes incredibly inspired, hops a 747 to Paris, France. And by the time he gets there, he's fluent in French. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm a vocalist. I've been singing since I was a little person. And that lends itself to this because the books, they're rhyming and they have a tempo all of their own. And it's, they're fun. They're fun in that way. But musically, I mean, I went into the studio and did the audiobooks before I ever had a book in hand. So, but that makes sense to me because I'm a singer,
Right, exactly.
So it just, yeah.
Well, and the thing too is that you're describing his personality. It does. I found that a lot of the characters that appeal most to children end up being characters that are basically like children. Like I'm thinking specifically of those minions and how they exploded and they're everywhere.
Yes.
I'm like, well, they love to eat bananas.
I love them.
They speak in gibberish.
Yes.
They like to run around and get in adventures. They're kind of fearless. I'm like, that sounds like a toddler to me. I have a toddler in the next in the other room. So
that's awesome. They probably love minions, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, for
yeah.
sure.
So Trippy sounds like he definitely fits within that wheelhouse.
Yeah. Well, another thing in the second book where he visits Paris, France, we develop, it ended up developing, and I was noticing as I'm writing, I'm like, wait a minute, this is kind of a character development, something a little additional, a little addition rather, to the first book, which was really more of an introduction as to who he was, what his problem was, and how he is with it, how he reacts to it. And the second book, it's more about the adventure, and it's his first real one. But in that one, he daydreams. And when he daydreams, the cool thing happens in the book, and I can only, oh my goodness, in a film, this would be so cool. He daydreams and he remembers like what the Great Book told him about, for instance, the Eiffel Tower. Well, it was built for the Paris World's Fair of 1889. Okay. So, he goes off in his mind and he imagines meeting all the cool people that were there. And I did a lot of research, Robert, to make sure to be as accurate as possible with what I was putting in, in this book. This book is over half it's 58 pages. I went a little crazy, but really I make no excuse for that because it is what it is, because in my mind, it's always been film. Always. But it just, it has to be a book. It's available in 4 different formats. I mean, it's on Audible, of course. It's a ebook, Kindle, a paperback, and a hardcover as well. So for both books. So, yeah.
It's funny too because I think the Paris one, because how I first came across you is my wife and I were at a Barnes and Noble here in Tampa, and you were you actually had the standee for Trippy, and we were with our daughter. We were just like walking around the children's section there, and she was of course drawn to the character design. And then I think my wife struck up a conversation with you, and you actually signed one of our books, and you that copy of that.
Reading?
We
You
were there. We were there
book reading?
right. Yeah. See, that's.
Stop it.
We were there right
God.
before. We were there right before the book reading. Like the book reading was going to happen. I think like 30 minutes after that, and we were like, well, we got to get our daughter home to nap, and because she was already starting to get kind of frantic as 2-year-olds do.
I am remembering you, and you said you couldn't stay because she had. Oh
Right.
my gosh!
Yes, exactly.
How fun is this? Don't you love the universe and how
I
things
know, it's so
work?
crazy.
Oh my God! So great to meet you again. What a hoot! What a hoot! And I am so glad you didn't do this prior. This is so fun. Oh my gosh! Wow!
Well, that's
thank you again for having me on your show. This is
Well, and that's
great.
when I get most of the guests I get for the show. Are connected on Twitter or whatever. So after we met. That time, which I don't know when that was, last year, maybe early this year. I forget exactly when that was.
It was last year towards the end. I think I want to say August or something.
It might have been something like that.
Because I was with. Yes, because I was with my friends. Yes. Oh my goodness, how funny! I love it. I love this.
So after that, I connected with you. I followed you on Twitter from my other Twitter account, and so I was like, "Who else could I invite to the show?" I was like, "Ooh, Laurie London. She'd be a great person. She has, she has a book series to talk about, and so yeah.
Nice.
So I thought you'd be a great addition to this. So, but that's part of what
this is great.
What made me think about and bring you on the show. But also, my wife is, when we met. And I'm sure people have listened to this podcast, like a lot of the other episodes. She's been on the show and stuff. So she went. She went on a travels to China and then Australia. And this was right before we started dating. So she quit her job and went and taught English in China for a few months, and then that ended up not working out. Neat. So she went to Australia and basically kind of lived there for 6 weeks or whatever, and then came back, and that's when we started dating on Valentine's Day of 2011.
Aww.
So she's basically a long way of saying she's really, she's a born traveler, and so I think she was really drawn to that aspect of the book, of your concept,
Trippy,
of traveling the world and how those experiences can enrich you and help you grow, and learning about other cultures, and having kind of an optimistic attitude about people and about all the world, literally, of possibilities out there. And I think that's what really spoke to her specifically, but us both about the character. And so I think you really hit on something kind of profound in a way with that, because I don't feel like that's a lesson really being taught very much. I feel like most people tend to not really travel too far beyond their hometown, or moving to another location. They don't really, especially internationally. So I think that that's a really great message to send to children from a young age.
Oh, thank you. And, I'm going to give it right back to God, because I'm inspired at all times, not all times, but I'm pretty, my mind, the way it works, maybe I look at things differently. I suppose I do. But yes, I'm somebody who I've traveled a bit, not world traveler, I'm doing it in my mind, through this fly, this character, but it gives me a lot of insight. I cannot tell you the amount of things that I learned from doing the research.
Oh, I'll bet.
For instance, listening audience out there, and Robert, did anybody know this? I didn't. There may be some that did, but the real name of the Statue of Liberty, the Paris, of course, is Liberty Enlightening the World. I mean, how cool is that? That's when I read that, I was like, what? I never remember hearing that in class, So, I mean, things like that. And that's just one little thing,
Yeah.
The Paris book, I did want to say one thing that we're kind of hitting on that. It's a special book, in the way that, each book is going to be special for its own reasons, obviously, but, or I feel that they are. But like the Paris book, for instance, there's a scene where he meets the poodle named Pierre, and they just love each other, and they're discussing weather and sports and finance and just all sorts of crazy things, right? Music, the arts, whatever. And, so he's leaving and he's on the boat, and this particular, it's a 2-page spread, I call it, but the constellation in the sky is an actual Paris constellation that's known like in that area or something. I give the credit to my illustrator, Heather Bonstetter, and she's a wonderful illustrator. And I was so fortunate to, I was supposed to find her, obviously, but she surprised me with that. I kept saying, "Would you put some more stars? I want some more stars." And she's like, "Well, if I do that, then it's going to wreck the constellation." And I said, "What do you mean?" So she would surprise me with little things sometimes. And if it was something I didn't like, of course she would, it would change. But,
right.
But yeah, so there's things like that. He's pretty limitless, as I said earlier. And, this is a can-do bug. He doesn't let stuff get him down. He does not. And I just finished, I finished it. It's been written already, but, there's always these little edits and things you have to do. But I wrote a song because, as I said, I'm a songwriter, and I wrote his theme song. It's the Trippi the Fly theme song. And what I would like to introduce back into children's cartoons, and whether or not whatever happens with this, I see him as a movie. I see him as a TV show for kids. I see him on Broadway. I mean, a sponge was up there. Why not Trippy?
Sure.
I'm going for the gusto in my brain here. But anyway, this song, what I would like to see, if you look at some of the iconic cartoons like Bugs Bunny and, the list goes on, right? Mm-hmm. You had orchestrated music. You had jazz music in a lot of this stuff. And the song I just wrote has some definite jazz influences in it. It's very bouncy. There's a boogie rhythm in behind it, under the bass line. It's going to be so cool once it's done. And at the end of the cartoon short, he will, the music, of course, will start that I wrote for this. And I'm going to get it put down, and I'll be singing on it. Whether or not that gets used at the end of the cartoon short or not remains to be seen. But I'm real excited about the song because I haven't done any writing for quite a while with regards to songwriting anyway. So, but yeah, that's really cool. I'm excited about that one big time.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun.
I really I admire the fact that you have this character and you recognize its potential, and so you're just like, we're just going to go for it and committing to that, because so often creative people or aspiring creative people, and I'm obviously myself included, have
Absolutely.
aspirations or ambitions for something, but we're like, I don't know if that's really going to work or whatever. And so we sit on it, or we delay on it, or we have self-doubt. I feel like having self-doubt and is kind of a hallmark of a creative person in general. So I applaud you for not only doing the books, but trying to push it as far as, see how far you can take it.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. And anybody listening to this, if you feel inspired from what I'm about to say, I hope you are, because I feel, and I mean this with all my heart, and I know, we know each other, but we don't really know each other, but right. I don't know anybody that's listening, but honestly, I believe this with all my heart and soul. We're here to help one another. I can't tell you how many people have uttered to me, I always wanted to write a book. I always wanted to write a book. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll help you if I can. I'll tell you what I did, because I self-published these books as well. Right. It's under Laurie London Entertainment. It's an LLC company that I have for the music and everything. So, but you're right. People, you know what? The only thing stopping anyone is themselves. And it's all, if you strip it all down, I'm going to go psychological here, but, it's fear-based, okay?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
What you have to be fearful about, you're fearful of being judged, you're fearful of failure. Well, how do you know which direction to go if you don't ever butt up against a wall? Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
I mean, I look at it like, I heard this once on a tape I was listening to, and I thought, oh, this is so profound. You're in a boat going down a river. Okay, well, you know what? If you're going upstream, maybe don't try to fight going upstream. Take your oar out of the boat and let it drift the way it wants to go. Right. Yeah. How about that for So honestly, you just have to. I know people say this all the time. Oh, you just have to believe, but you also have to block out, and I don't mean this badly towards any of the people who are the naysayers, but you have to surround yourself with like-minded people. It is so true. And you have to surround yourself with people who are supportive, because if you're around the other, and I won't even go in, everybody knows what I'm talking about. If you're around people who are not supportive or they're naysayers, you know, you don't need that to use that extra energy to fight against that or to have that making, you know, noise in your head. You need to be around the positive energy people, get out, go to places that, you know, that invite this type of work. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
So that's something that I try to do, but I don't know. I was gifted with a powerful sense of, like, especially now that things are happening, of like who I am and what my potential is. And, you know, we're all gifted in so many ways. Even at my regular job, there's so many creative people. Oh my goodness. There's a couple gals that their drawings, they're just beautiful. I would go to one of their art shows if they would have one, you know, and I'm always asking them, so have you, you know, because they have this desire to do it, but yet not doing it. You can't force people. You can only encourage them. I have a sister who writes gorgeous poetry. You know, she recently went out and read her stuff at a poetry slam. And I was like, all right. I was so happy to hear that. Because the funny thing was, she said people were coming up to her going, oh, how long have you been doing this? Because you're so good. And she's like, oh, you know,
starting tonight, basically.
I've been doing this for my whole life, but I've never, you know, got out and done it. So I was so happy and joyful for her because, you know, here on this earth, we have so much time in these bodies, and why not? What are you afraid of? Just do it. Just do it. Yeah. You know, it's and see what happens, you know. But very important, surround yourself with those types of folks that I mentioned earlier. That's the only advice I really have, you know. But but I will not stop. I'm tenacious when it comes to this bug right here. Oh yeah.
And it's all. I think it's also. And then we'll get to the film here. We're going to talk about. But I think it's also
wonderful.
I think it's also too the you know, people have excuses, or they're just like, it's hard to make time for things, which it is. I mean, you know, this podcast is not my regular thing. Obviously, we're recording this on a Sunday night, and my wife and daughter are like elsewhere in the house and stuff. So it's it's all about finding time. And I think people feel like, well, how could I possibly start something like that? It's like, well, you have a break at your current job, or you have, you know, a half hour, 15 minutes every night take for yourself to do some writing or painting or sculpting or whatever your artistic endeavor is. But yeah, I think it's really important to do that. If for yourself, and or, you know, even if you don't want to like pursue it as a career, just indulge your creative side, because everybody has some kind of I feel like most people have some kind of creative outlet or aspiration of something that they want to do, even if it's just for that sense of fulfillment within themselves. So
I would love to add something to that, Robert, if I could. For me, and I can only speak for myself, obviously, but I can remember asking myself this question years ago, and it was like, okay, when did I last feel engaged? When did I last feel really joyful? And you know, I had to go back quite a ways. And it was like, okay, so you get off track and you have to ask yourself that, because I've asked people that, you know, friends or people that I work with, and like, well, what makes you happy? I don't know. Like, I don't know anymore. And that's not good, you know, and you need to find that again, because it's there somewhere. It is. It's just been, you know, covered up, hidden, whatever, you know, but find your joy, find your passion. And don't worry about what anybody thinks or says. And another thing too, let me add this. Oh my goodness. When you start asking people for their opinion about what you're doing, how do I say this? If you're looking for adoration or something like that, I mean, that's okay to look for adoration, but don't have that be your guide.
Right.
You really have to be clear with yourself about what it is that makes you happy and gives you joy, and then go for it. And who cares what other people think or say? Oh my goodness. I mean, really.
Yeah, it's almost like you want to, it's almost like I would understand some creative people that just want to keep their project to themselves until a certain point.
Yeah, sure.
Just because it could throw off your mojo, just as you have that, getting that momentum going with your story or whatever. So
yeah, I understand that too, for sure.
Good advice. Good advice, all. I feel like I feel like we could expand on that and just have our own one conversation just about all of that.
Totally.
But maybe
oh my goodness,
I that another time.
Yeah. Okay, I would love to. Let me know.
Absolutely. So this episode, we're talking about Christmas in Connecticut from 1945. So let's listen to a little bit of the trailer right now.
there isn't any Santa Claus. Look what I found in my stocking.
Heaven help a sailor on a Christmas like this.
This is the jolliest, merriest Christmas I ever spent.
Nah. It is so romantic. It gives me pimples all over the goose.
I'm as free as a bird.
Oh, that's what you think.
That was a little bit of the trailer for Christmas in Connecticut from 1945, director Peter Godfrey. So, Laurie, what made you want to talk about this film? When did you first see it? Actually, let's start there.
Well, I love the black and white movies. I do. I don't know that I would categorize this as a screwball comedy, but it's of that nature. You know, I'm a big Capra fan. I like feel good movies. Always have. I am a romantic. There's no question about that. You know, when did I see this one? I saw this one later in life. This wasn't like among my favorites, you know, the Christmas movies, you know, The Bishop's Wife.
Right.
What's the one they play every year? Good Lord. It is a Capra movie. It's a Wonderful Life. You know, it wasn't in there with those. I don't know. I probably saw this maybe 10 years ago for the first time. I do love Barbara Stanwyck, though. I really do. And she's in another movie that after I had picked this one, you know how you second guess. You go, oh darn, I wish I would have asked him about that one. She was in another one that I love called Ball of Fire. And if you've never seen that one, that's a crazy movie because what it had, and I'll just lightly touch on it because I know we're talking about this one, but that one touches on slang, which I'm dealing with some slang, but working on some in my third book where Trippi goes to London. And so perhaps that's why I find that one so crazy and fun. There's a cameo with Gene Krupa, and it's just a fun movie. Check it out, Ball of Fire. But anyway, Christmas in Connecticut. I love Christmas movies. I mean, I don't know. And again, I'm very much a romantic. I like Barbara Stanwyck. I also like Dennis Morgan. I didn't know that he sang, and in this movie he sings, and he's got quite the Irish-sounding accent there when he was singing. It kind of came up a little bit. He sounded very Irish. So that was kind of interesting. And I do like the song, too. It's got a lovely melody. And I think one of the writers is Jerome, and I can't think of the other fellow's name. But anyway, but what I like about this movie is I relate to it. First of all, she's a writer. You know, sure, she's writing articles in a magazine, but still, she is a writer. And one of the first scenes that really I like a lot is where you first see her, and the camera is kind of panning in as she's writing about her toasty warm, you know, the food and her fireplace in Connecticut, and what the camera is panning to is her apartment with a radiator and like there's clothes hanging on a line. It's obvious that she's probably in New York City somewhere in a city building, you know, far from you know, a country home in Connecticut with a large fireplace. But I related to her because of that and the fact that she's a writer. And she's a woman, you know, making her way, you know, she's a single woman making her way. And, but the funny part about this is obviously she's writing as someone else. Mm-hmm. And as you know, by watching the movie, as we go into it, it turns out that the person that the article was written for, the magazine, the person that owns the magazine, which is Alexander Yardley, that character, played by Sydney Greenstreet, you know, he's kind of a hard tack, you know, and he's kind of a bulldozer personality, and he wants her to have this soldier of war who had been capsized from their boat that got blown out of the water over for Christmas dinner. And so she doesn't have a house in Connecticut. She doesn't have a husband. She doesn't have a baby, you know, an 8-month-old baby.
Yeah, the baby part was really
the beginning of the
troubling.
fun. Yeah, right. It was boy and then it was a girl. What I liked about Miss Stanwyck, though, like whoever, I shouldn't say whoever, the writers for this, her intended, this man that keeps asking her to marry him and she keeps telling him no, the character's name is John. I couldn't help but snicker, like every time she was so insulting to him, and she would just say it kind of deadpan. Her delivery was pretty funny. And like there was one scene where he says, "Oh, are you saying you'll marry me?" And she's like, "Well, do you think you can?" What was it? Something about you know how I feel, Don. I don't love you.
Would you still want me or something?
Yeah.
Knowing how I feel.
Or could you wait? He goes, I could wait or whatever. And she goes, you could wait that long? Like, it's going to be an eternity. And I thought that was hysterical. And then there's another scene when they do get to the house in Connecticut, which is actually his place, his farm. He actually has a home in Connecticut. When they get there, where he kisses her, and then he starts talking about his work that has to do with like plumbing and pipes and this and that. And she goes, when you kiss me, John, could you not talk about plumbing? And he goes, oh, well, okay, dear. What would you like me to talk about? And she goes, do you have to talk at all? I don't know why, but that just cracked me up. And he's like totally, it's over his head. He has no idea, yeah. So I did like that, but the part that killed me the most, that was so like funny and your ears kind of pop up. Did you notice that every time she referred to her supposed child, the baby, it was an it?
Mm-hmm. I did notice that.
It never was a boy or girl, but that was intentional. I mean,
well, yeah.
I wonder what it wants, you know?
Well, and the thing, because this movie actually came out like summer of 1945, and it ended up still being one of the year's most successful movies. I mean, it made $3 million, which was a lot in 1945.
That is a lot in 45.
And and yeah, what I find interesting about it is that like the society in which the film depicts obviously feels very dated in a lot of ways. They're all, the men are just like, oh, a woman that can't cook, how dare she? That kind of mindset.
Right.
But
it's an expectation.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's what they did. The fact that she is a working girl makes her very different outside of the, so in a lot of ways, in that particular way, I'm not going to say in all ways because definitely not. There's a lot of similarity between women of today, but then there's a lot of things that are very unfamiliar of women of today. So we talked about this a little bit before, but go ahead with what you're saying.
And I was going to say, it's in a lot of ways that her character feels very modern because of that, because she is... Yeah. Because like in 1945, this must have been like a high concept comedy. A woman, what? Who is like a single working girl and just like, just lives alone and has a giant, has like a fancy mink coat delivered to her apartment. And like,
she's successful. She's successful.
Exactly.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess that's what I like about it. I like her strong character. Right. I like that a lot. Yeah.
And Barbara Stanwyck is so good here, as you mentioned, with the comedy and just as a romantic lead. She's one of those, like, if you ask a lot of fans of classic cinema who their favorite actresses are, a lot of them will say Barbara Stanwyck, because she had a lot of range from something like this to something like Double Indemnity. Like, has a lot of experience under her belt, and she had kind of an amazing career. So it's unfortunate. I feel like that a lot of like more casual moviegoers now don't really, she's not maybe remembered in the same way as someone like Marilyn Monroe or other stars from around the time. I guess for, I don't know, whatever reason that is, but I that's part of why I like doing this show, is that to shed a light on some older films and like smaller films and different things that some listeners might not be familiar with Barbara Stanwyck or her work or this film in particular. And yeah, she's so much fun here. And the film is, it's funny because I've only talked about one Christmas movie on this version of the podcast up to this point, and that's White Christmas, which also is kind of starts with a war setting and then transitions into a holiday thing. And I guess this movie does the same kind of thing, because when it starts, you don't meet Elizabeth until, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes in or something, because you're spending all this time Jeff and
Dennis Morgan. Yes,
exactly. And
his food issues of not being able to keep stuff down because he had starved on the boat when they were out at sea. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And then so what happens with that is that him and one of his fellow sailors are stuck on a raft for, I guess it ended up being like 18 days or something when all is said and done.
Right. Yes.
And they're in the hospital just like recovering, and so he kind of like gets into a relationship with one of the nurses so he could get good food, I guess, essentially.
So
and that's his motivation.
Food. I mean, right? Yeah. And it just, the guy's face, I guess, because he has kind of a comical, the friend, he has more of a comical kind of look to him. And what did he call it? He called
the old Magoo.
Show her
Gotta use the old Magoo.
The old Magoo.
Yeah, I took a note of that. I was like, oh, wow. Okay.
Old Magoo. I never heard that. I was like, that's different. Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, that's it. And then the part of where the nurse, the one who he kind of sort of is engaged to, right? And then she ends up marrying the friend, the old Magoo guy towards the end.
And then you meet Mary early on, and then I actually kind of forgot about her, so that when she shows up later on, you're just like, really? Oh, wait, I forgot. She's still a thing. They need to resolve that too.
Yeah. You need to resolve, right, exactly. Yeah. I married, what you call him, Stinky or Stinksy, something like
Sinky.
that.
I think his name was like Sinkowitz. And so, she calls him Sinky. Yeah. She has nicknames for everybody.
Yeah.
But you don't even meet Elizabeth until like 10 minutes in. So it almost feels like it's going to be his story. And then it just like drastically shifts over to her perspective for pretty much the rest of the movie. Yeah. And, you see, I haven't seen enough of these classic films, especially the romantic comedies, but this really puts in a better context. Something like You've Got Mail, or something like, some of the more recent, more modern comedies that are like the Mistaken Identity, and like then you mentioned the screwball comedy aspect of it. I definitely think this is part of that. I mean, like we said, the man's motivation is food, and then it's like this whole thing like everybody's putting on airs, and she's running around pretending to know how to flip a flapjack and what gender the baby is or isn't, depending on. And then there's a whole sequence where the baby is in air quotes kidnapped, and everybody's freaking out. And oh god.
It was ridiculous that he swallowed a watch. Like, how would a baby swallow a watch? And that was made up by the wonderful. Oh God, I'm going to mess it up. Is it SK?
SZ Sakal, I think. SZ
Sakal.
Yeah, he was.
Sakal, who's been in tons of movies. But that whole thing with the watch, he of course made that up,
Right.
But But I love his. I believe, is he a Hungarian actor? I think he was.
I believe so.
But yeah, he's a great character actor. I've seen him in many other things.
He was probably honestly the kind of the VIP of this movie for me in a lot of ways, because he was driving. It always felt like Felix was one step ahead of everyone else. Like he could tell that Elizabeth had a thing for Jeff, or from the first meeting instantly. The whole thing, and this is the other part of the screwball comedy where I think that really comes in, is with the judge. John Sloan is trying to get the judge to marry them like 6 times throughout the movie, and she keeps finding ways to duck that, and it's just like people like it's kind of madcap at certain points.
And then Uncle Felix is going to make the judge. He says, "I make you martini. I make you 2 martinis." He goes, 2 Manhattans. Like, that'll do it. And then didn't they make the guy go out the window at one point?
Yeah, he's like, shortcut.
Yeah.
Well, and then the judge gives Uncle Felix the card, and he the business card, and he rips it up because he's like, that's not happening. And I have other plans for all these people. So he's
he was totally navigating, not navigating, but he was what's the word? Yeah, he was
kind of matchmaker in this whole situation.
Totally.
And I really loved the chemistry between Dennis Morgan and Barbara Stanwyck in this. Like, there are some really, really romantic scenes when they're walking around, and let's see, I took notes of a couple. The cow. That was the first one. Was the cow? Yeah. And they're basically like straight out saying, "Hey, we kind of like each other, but we can't do anything because I'm pretending to be married, and he's,
Right.
engaged, which at that point, I forgot that was even a plot point.
I forgot also. Yes, I forgot about it too. Yeah. But I thought, I remember, I've seen this movie many times. It's one of my favorites. But I remember thinking to myself, thinking about our talk tonight. And I was thinking to myself, back then, that was probably pretty brazen dialogue or, the script being written that way. Because, she says, well, is there a girl that you're thinking about right now? Yeah. Does she live on a farm? Yeah. And then she turns and she goes, and oh, does she like animals? Yes. And then she says, Jeffrey Jones, are you, or Jeffrey Jones? No.
Are you flirting with me? She says at one point.
Yes, are you flirting with me?
Have you ever kissed a married woman?
Oh, no. Married woman. Right. Oh, no. If I could, I would, or something. It was very, very, out there for probably the time that this was written.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
And now, of course, it's like nothing,
Well, and then there's other things that I'm like, that's kind of almost like certain moments of almost naughty humor, like where he's like yes. on the cow, and he's like, oh, a nice firm rump, and she's like, hey, what? Like things like that, where I'm like, that's kind of almost not quite sexual, but definitely like suggestive humor for 1945.
It's very suggestive.
Yeah. It's it's not obviously in your face, but you forget just how subversive some of these older movies can be with really adult themes. I recently, my wife and I, just a few months ago, we watched The Apartment, and I'm like, wow, this, like, a giant part of this movie deals with suicide, like a suicide attempt. And this is, 1960, I think that movie came out, something like that. And I think because I was born in 83, so all these movies are way before my time. So I didn't get a chance to see a lot of them, obviously, growing up. So seeing them now, you just have this image in your head of, oh, those movies back then, they're so wholesome. And like, no, not really. And like, they're kind of risque in their own way sometimes. Yeah. And this movie had elements of that.
Oh yeah, it had a healthy dose of it. Yeah, but honestly, the cow scene was the only place that I noted anything like that. The rest of it was, but it was, I don't know. The writing was it was very good, the way they did it. I did want to mention one thing though. What was for you? Can I ask you a question?
Sure,
what
of course.
Was the most absurd thing that you saw in this movie, or dialogue that you saw? I know what I thought was like, and I don't mean absurd like I was offended, or I don't mean anything like that. Just kind of screwball. I'm just curious.
We kind of already mentioned it, but it was the thing where the baby is all of a sudden like swallowed the watch and is like, but it's blonde and has teeth and it talks. Like, I was like, wow, this is crazy. Or like even earlier.
Oh, what did she say? Yeah, how would you feel? What did she say? She goes, well, how would you feel if you just swallowed a watch? Or how would you?
Yeah, don't you think you'd be looking different if you just swallowed a watch? Yeah.
Wouldn't you become a totally different sex if you'd swallowed a watch?
Well, or even earlier where he's like, she mistakenly thinks that the baby initially is a boy. She's like, oh, baby, his name is Robert. And she's like, what did you say his name was? And I'm like, Roberta. Like, it's a real comedy of errors throughout.
The thing that I recall being pretty absurd is do you remember the scene where Alexander Yardley, the owner of the magazine, right, is talking to John, who she's supposed to be getting married to, the guy she doesn't love, okay? And he's talking to him about the Smart Housekeeping Baby, and that some other magazine, they're copying the Elizabeth Lane, and it's an out and out outrage, and but they just had another baby, and babies raise circulation of the magazine, and he's basically saying to him that they need to that her and the fake husband need to have another baby to boost circulation for the magazine because babies sell. And I just thought, what an absurd, ridiculous thing for anybody to say to anybody. But that just goes to the character of this Alexander Yardley, Sydney Greenstreet, who played that so well. By the way, I thought.
And he's not
good.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say he's a force of nature for sure. That his character, yeah. Yeah,
and in my research, I found that he played a lot of actually like heavies in movies. Like he wasn't. This is kind of a rare comedic role for for him, I believe.
For him.
So I think he does a great job really playing into the kind of overblown, like, executive type that's just like, all about profits. And I noticed a lot throughout, and I think this is one of the most obvious ways that the movie really points out that John Sloan is not a good fit for Elizabeth, even in addition to the fact that she doesn't love him. But also, like, he's so focused on his own profits, on his own mission. Like, he's like,
materialistic.
Hey, look, this is double insulation on the walls. And, like, at a certain point, he's just angling to get his own job under Yardley Publications. And that supersedes his interest in Elizabeth. He's like, okay, whatever. We're not gonna get married, but I'm gonna get that that job, right?
Yeah, he switched up. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I noticed that too. And of course, then getting on to the final scene where he finds out, or actually it's Felix. Once again, it's Uncle Felix finds out from the nurse that she married, Stinky, the friend.
Right.
And so then he tells, the Dennis Morgan character. And then when he goes in there, he doesn't tell her right away that he knows. And he's going back to that scene with the cow, with Makushka and the cow out in the snow. And he's like, well, I changed my mind. I do kiss married women. And she's like, get away from me, you wolf. It's pretty funny. It was good. It was a good scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun movie. It really is. And it's more, I'm realizing more things about it and actually talking with you about it than just watching it. I even have more of an appreciation for it. Now, as far as you had asked before, does this movie still fly or still, is it still, well, I mean, there's many parts about the movie that today and age, would not be,
right.
I mean, you could take issue with a lot of things with this movie, but that's not why I watch movies. Me personally, I'm not offended by anything, that I watched here with regards to, I notice it, of course, how could I not, with regards to women and their role and so on and so forth. But then you've got kind of the heroine and the strong female role of the Barbara Stanwyck, and she plays it beautifully. And so, I just love this movie.
I think one of the moments that I noticed kind of the dated sensibility. I think at one point Yardley finds out that they're not married and that he thinks that the baby is there. So he's like, you mean that baby is a no? Like, as if having a baby out of wedlock is some like tremendous sin, which at the time it was a much bigger deal than it is now. So I thought one of the things I was like, oh, okay, that's supposed to, I got you. I see what you're doing, movie.
And I think his character in the movie, I guarantee you that character was thinking, sure, it was what you just said as well, but it was also like how this would affect the magazine and his standing and things. Yeah. The smart housekeeping baby. Oh my goodness.
But it's almost like the film is about a modern woman kind of invading this 1945 man's world, in that there's I think Alexander Yardley shows up and he's like, oh, I'm looking for and he regards Sloane as, oh, are you Elizabeth Lane's husband? And he doesn't like being
called that,
identified by his pretend wife, basically, especially in these days where you were Mrs. such and such, you were Mrs. your husband, you're Mrs. John Sloane. You're not, this one's not Elizabeth Lane's husband. Your identity, you're as a woman, is dependent on your husband, and that's kind of who you are. Right, exactly. Well, it also delves into, as you mentioned earlier, she's a writer, and it's the difference between your private life and kind of the persona that you put out there, and how that's the major conflict for Elizabeth, at least, aside from the romantic plot as well, that, she doesn't want to, that's the image that she's created for, I'm this, she's created this image of a 1945 housewife who, she has a column, but she's raising the kid and she's staying in the kitchen like you're supposed, like a good wife is supposed to do. But meanwhile, she's like, no, I'm just gonna, I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to flip a single flapjack, although she pulls it off here miraculously, thanks to some divine intervention by Felix, I guess. But she's just like,
you do without Felix.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, Felix is the hero of this movie. I mean, we sort of touched on that, right?
Yeah.
Nothing in this movie works out for anyone unless Felix intervenes, basically.
Unless he's, yes, or he's watching, or he's, I don't want to say manipulating, but in a way, he kind of does manipulate some of the situations so that things will work, right?
But it all sort of works out for everybody by the end, to the point where you have that kind of I think it's Yardley. I think was like, oh, what a Christmas, like kind of very very comical like ending, and I think that it's very much. It's always fun to watch it. You mentioned liking feel-good movies. This is definitely a movie that does not take itself seriously. It's not one of those comedies that has heavy themes or heavy, like it's all very light and fluffy and it's an easy watch. So I can see why it has endured in the kind of the way that it has. And they actually did a remake for TV in 1992, directed by Arnold Schwarzenegger of all people, with Diane Cannon and Chris Christopherson in the lead. So I was like, I don't know how that. From what I heard, it did not turn out particularly well. And I could,
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember the name of it? Or
I think it was Christmas in Connecticut, and they just did it in 1992 because I had heard about that. I was like, I think they did this for TV at one point. And I looked it up. I was like, yeah, they did. Directed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Wow. Okay.
Wow.
And I feel like that might have been one of those just like cash in attempts. Like, hey, you all remember this movie? We're going to try and modernize. But I feel like a lot of these old movies that stand the test of time, it's because they are timeless in a way. Like I mentioned Some Like It Hot earlier. That's a movie that a lot of the kind of sexual politics of that hold up today, like pretty well. Like they're not. Yes. It's actually a really smart satire about gender dynamics and all of that. And I don't think films like that need to be remade. I think if anything, you just need people like us to talk about them and be like, hey, go check out this movie. I know it's black and white, and some of you young people might not be into that, but it's definitely worth revisiting. There's a lot of really funny stuff in this film, and I don't know how well it necessarily works as a Christmas movie, because there's not a lot that's like essential about the Christmas aspect of it. I guess just the kind of the sleigh ride probably is the most obvious use of holiday iconography, I guess. And there's also like
when he was singing,
that's true.
That's piano. True. She was doing the tree, and but you're right. There's not a lot other than that. I mean, really, that probably is the two things.
Well, which is why, in a way, it made sense that they put this out in July. It was like, hey, Christmas, and maybe this. I wonder how far back the Christmas in July concept goes, because this movie was clearly trying to capitalize on that. Because by my research, it came out July 20th, 1945. So I think people were like, hey, you want to watch a holiday movie in July? We got it for you.
But there's something. Wow.
There's a lot of really sweet moments in here that you see early on. As I mentioned, Lane and Jones, that they have this instant connection, and he's again, another thing that really struck me is with how it's kind of ahead of its time as far as gender dynamics. She has no idea how to bathe a child. He's like rolling up his sleeves, like, oh, I used to take care of my sister's kids, and he knows exactly how to care for the child, and I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, this movie's a lot smarter than I even realized until we have been talking here. It really. It's a lot smarter, and again, I'll say it again, it probably of its time was, not an edgy movie, but it was doing things that weren't done, and I applaud that. That's really cool.
Yeah. There's the baby moment. There's another with the piano moment. There's a few moments where she's looking at him, and she's really, you can feel the emotion in those scenes, and the chemistry is really palpable.
They played well together, and yes, the chemistry was definitely there. Casting, I've always said this, and I'm not a filmmaker, but it is huge. It's huge. If you don't get the right casting, you could have the best script ever, and it won't get pulled off because you don't have that marriage of all the essentials that are needed, to have a great film. And this is one of my favorites. I have many, if you ever have me back, Robert,
Oh, absolutely.
I would love to talk to you, and we could discuss Ball of Fire, because that movie, again, I'm bringing it up again, but it's got so much comedy and craziness in it, but the slang, the use of the slang, and some of the slang we still use today.
Really?
And basically, these guys, they're a bunch of professors, and they are putting together the first encyclopedia, okay? And so they've been doing this, they've been at it for like 9 years, and they find that they've been in the house too long, or the character of Gary Cooper plays opposite Barbara Stanwyck in this movie. And I love Gary Cooper as well, but he realizes when the milkman comes to deliver, the milk, that he goes, that man spoke a living language. She goes, I just embalmed a few old dead words. He goes, by being in this house for so long, I've lost, he's lost sight, because he's doing a special section on slang in the encyclopedia. So then that brings him out to the live venues where he meets the character of Streisand, who is singing in a dance hall. And actually there's a cameo with Gene Krupa, who was a fabulous drummer, and it's just a fun film, and I would love to do that one if you ever have me back.
Yeah, of course. Of course, absolutely. Just a couple more things on Christmas in Connecticut that I wanted to mention. One, the flapjack flipping thing, which we touched on. I also noticed not only how hard that she kind of fell for him way like before he even realized that he had feelings for her. I think in a way, because as soon as he comes in, she's like, oh. And then she
they just stared at each other.
Yeah, for like a minute, and Sloane is like, "Hey, guys, right here,
wake up!"
But so she's like, "No, I don't want to flip a flapjack. I'm not up for it. Let Nora take care of it." And then until Jones asks, and she's like, "Oh, well, now I got to, because I have to. I don't want to disappoint him." And so there's that.
You know what? I didn't catch that.
Yeah,
I didn't catch that.
Oh, I was really keyed in on the chemistry there with the two of them and how that was developing. What else? I really like the there's this like a statue or something that she keeps picking up because she's like ready to break it. She's like ready to snap. She's like, all the deception I think was like driving her mad, and so at a certain point she's just like, screw it, and she smashes it. And then I think a few moments later, she says goodbye, whatever. And then she comes in, she has the whole, I'm tired of being pushed around. I'm tired of that, which again, we were talking about how she's such a modern woman. In 1945, for a woman to say that.
She told him off. Yeah.
That was great.
She told him off. Yeah. It was great. It was a great moment. Yeah. She was being nice, and now, no, done, boom.
Exactly.
And then she tells him to leave the room. And for her to, with him being such a, in many ways, kind of a little bit of a bully, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, but I don't know. I wouldn't say bully. He's just such a force, Right. He's just such a, but he does kind of mow you over. He doesn't listen, that's for sure, when you're trying to tell him something else. And I think that's why she snapped, and she just kind of went off on him. And but you're right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, she owned it. Mm-hmm.
I love the movie's version, which, I mean, to me feels like the correct version of feminism anyway, which is, you don't have to be a mother and wife. You don't have to be a working mother. If you want, you can do all of it. And that's ultimately, I think, where the movie ends up, is that she's been focusing, and this is a very, obviously very common thing in romantic comedies, from the 90s to now and all that stuff, like the career woman who just meets the right guy and all of a sudden, she's falling in love and she doesn't know how to balance the two worlds. Like, that's a very common trope. And I think this movie is, an early version of that archetype in action. So by the end, she falls in love with Jones, and it implies that they're going to get married, I guess, sometime, and then right after the credits roll, basically. So the idea that she will then continue being successful as a working woman, as a writer, but then also have her husband and then have a kid if she chooses at some point. So I like where the movie ends up, in that she kind of takes ownership on her life in a more concrete way than she did at the beginning of the movie. It's kind of her arc, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. And she would have sacrificed and given up, obviously, had she married the John Sloan character. But I want to bring up something that you just, the fact that she's an author and she's artistic and she's, doing her own thing, being, a modern Millie, if you will, in a different kind of a world at that time. But if you remember the Jones character, he is an artist and a painter. Do you remember when he said that to the nurse? Mm-hmm. She was talking to him about getting married, and he was kind of trying to back out. He's like, well, as an artist and a painter, I've never really had a home, So I like the fact that he's an artist and a painter, and she's an author, and they're both all kind of artistic. So, yeah, it's like perfect.
Yeah, that's true. I'd forgotten about that.
That is an element of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes more sense. The movie, in kind of a subtle way, it lays the groundwork for why these two are such a good match. That they have similar sensibilities, as opposed to. I mean, we talked earlier when we were talking about Trippi the Fly about following your passion and things like that, and that's very much the way she is, and that seems like that's very much the way he is, and we don't really get a sense of his life pre-entering the war. So I think just that one line is kind of most we get. And we see him play the piano too. So obviously he's creatively inclined.
Oh, that's right. And he sings.
Yeah,
that's
so
right.
He's like a Renaissance man.
So he's an artist, a painter. He's a Renaissance man. Yeah.
Good.
I love it.
Elizabeth Lane hit the jackpot basically.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny. I had put together a picture book for Trippi, and in one of the quips, I said something about him being. We took pictures at one of the art institutes, and my photographer friend Don Pointer, and I said something about him. He really loves all the paintings and statues, and he's a real Renaissance bug. I wrote on the thing.
Nice.
Oh, yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, you know what? I'll tell you, I never dreamed, with regards to the writing and everything, I never dreamed I would be doing this in a million years. Right. If you asked me a few years ago, well, no, I'm a singer songwriter. I don't, I'm not. And it's like now to say, oh, I'm an author. It sounded strange initially, but now I'm more. I've kind of gotten into it more, and I'm like, oh yeah, I am an author, But I was always a singer. I as a kid, my dad was a promoter in the Chicago area for many years for country and Western music, and we didn't even touch on that. But I was like 12 years old or 13. I was opening for Marty Robbins and people like Loretta Lynn and Mel Tillis, Conway Twitty, people of those iconic country and Western singers. So my background has been stage and singing and music and songwriting. I feel very blessed to have had those experiences, and I still love to sing. And now and again, if I can do a concert or something, I do. But right now, it just seems like Trippi the Fly. He's just it's pulling at all sides of me, and so I'm going with the flow of that. And that's funny. I actually sing in the voice of Tripi the Fly.
When you mentioned that earlier, I was like, I bet that's in the voice of Tripi the Fly. I bet that's how that song goes.
It is.
Are you?
I sing, but he has a section in there where he sings. Yeah.
Are you willing to do any of the voice of Tripi the Fly now that you brought it up?
Well, I could, sure, yeah. Let's see. So Robert, if I was going to say hi to you in the voice of Tripi the Fly, he has like this thing that he does. There's a word that he says, like when he's really happy about something or he likes something, and he might just come up and say the word brilliant. That's how he sounds.
Nice.
Hi, Robert.
Hey, Trippi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I look forward to your short.
That's not exactly it. I'm sitting here, my throat's all dried out. That's not the perfection, but that's close.
Yeah, that's like one take.
Anyway.
Yeah. Do you have anything else about Christmas in Connecticut that you wanted to mention before we start winding down?
Yeah, it's a nice movie out there, folks. If you're listening, the audience that's listening, maybe you've had a bad day, you want to lighten your mood, pop on Christmas in Connecticut.
There you go. I actually think too.
That's pretty much it.
Part of why I like to have the guests select the film is that I think you can find a lot. I think you can find learned a lot about a person by learning what kind of art they're into. So what kind of music they listen to, what kind of films they're drawn to. Mm-hmm. And I think the fact that, we had kind of two conversations here, one about you following your passion with Trippi the Fly, and then the second about this movie about people essentially following their passion. I think there's a very, obvious kind of parallel between the way you live your life and the way that Elizabeth Lane is, she doesn't want to fall into being the housewife of the successful businessman. She wants to be with the man that she feels drawn to. She wants to do her writing and be creative and follow her passion rather than just be like, well, I'm in 1945, so I guess I have to just stay at home and do the dishes and change the diapers and that kind of thing.
And flip sweat.
Do the flapjacks. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's...
And hope they don't hit the ceiling.
God. So, I think that's, it's kind of an interesting connection between the two. And I wanted to say thanks to you for bringing this movie to the table, literally, because I hadn't seen this one before, as I mentioned at some point in the recording. And this gave me an opportunity to go back and to check it out and cross that movie off my blind spots. And I always, as you mentioned, I always, too, have the same experience that whenever I talk about a movie on here, whether it's something I've seen before or something I'm just watching now for the first time, I always get a richer appreciation for it, or I always see more from having these like extended kind of critical analysis sessions with fellow cinephiles and things like that. So I think I agree with everything you said. I think people should definitely check this out. And I'm posting this with plenty of time to the holiday season, so people want to go and check this out, whether it's Christmas time or not. I mean, it's definitely a fun romantic comedy that I think holds up pretty well today, as we touched on.
Yes, in different ways. And it is, I feel enlightened after having this discussion with you. And like you said, just kind of not debating it, but just sharing different thoughts and feelings about it, and I feel a little enlightened with regards to I'm probably going to get off the phone with you and watch it again.
Good, there you go. Excellent.
Robert, it has been so wonderful. What a joy. I've had such a good time. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show.
So, Laurie, can you tell people where they can find you on social media and keep up to date with everything that Trippi's doing?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. So I have a website. Actually, I've got two websites. One is Laurie London Entertainment, and that is for the children's books, the children's series. There's video on there of me reading the first and second book to a cardboard cutout of Trippi. I made my own little homemade stage here in the house. That was a lot of fun. There are audio clips from both books. There are links to where you can go to purchase the books, which are available on Amazon and, of course, Barnes & Noble online. Let's see, Facebook. Tripi the Fly has over 13,000 people following him. So feel free to do that as well. Laurie London, I'm on Facebook, of course. And let's see. Oh, by the way, if you Facebook Laurie London, boy, I should really change this. Not the black and white picture. It's the colored picture.
Okay.
That's so embarrassing. I have to change that. So anyway, but Tripi the Fly is on there. I'm also on Twitter as Laurie London 6. Also Laurie London 13 for Tripi the Fly. Instagram, Laurie London, and LinkedIn, Laurie London. So, pretty much all of those social media places. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to become part of my email, I don't send out too often unless there's an event. but you can go to the entertainment site and send your email in there to become a member there. And that's about it. Yeah. So pretty much anywhere, just type in Laurie London, and that's Lori, London like England. And Trippi the Fly is spelled Trip, like you're taking a trip, and then Trippi the Fly.
Excellent. Well, Laurie, this has been an absolute pleasure, and I will absolutely have you back on. I'll make note of Ball of Fire so that
I'd love that.
We'll schedule that at some point down the line, and hope maybe you'll have a more of an update on the short and how everything's going with Trippi next time we talk.
Yes, I think I will. I don't think I will. I know I will. And thank you again so much. And I would love to come back on the show sometime. And just thank you. This was so fun. It's so great to meet you, Robert.
Yeah, same here.
Again, or meet you again.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's so wild that we actually met in Tampa, Florida, when I was doing a reading at Barnes and Noble. I can't believe this. That's so wild.
I mean, I didn't necessarily expect you to even remember, because you're sure you do a lot of those, so you meet all kinds of people. So there's something I remember. I can't get a face, mind you, but I remember talking to some people, and they made the comment about having to get their child home. That was you guys, wasn't it? It was you. It was us.
That is so wild. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, anyway, thank you again.
Very welcome.
I am. It was so much fun. Thank you, Robert. You take care. Okay.
Thanks, Laurie. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.
If you're interested in joining me on the show to chat about one of your favorite films, head on over to crookedtable.com/guest. Or you can consider supporting the show at patreon.com/crookedtable. Of course, you can always find more podcasts, reviews, videos, and other movie-related goodies over at crookedtable.com. Until next time, this has been the Crooked Table Podcast, and I've been Rob.
This has been a production of crookedtable.com. All rights reserved.
The art of the little KED.